Bill Harris here. We need to talk about something that's happening in swing state America right now. Donald Trump's approval ratings are underwater in states he won just a year ago. And I'm not talking about California or New York where you'd expect him to be unpopular. I'm talking about Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Arizona, Georgia, Nevada, North Carolina, the states that put him back in the White House. This isn't speculation or partisan analysis. This is hard data from multiple polling sources showing that a significant number of voters who supported Trump in 2024 are now having second thoughts. And this matters because these are the same states that will determine control of Congress in next year's midterm elections and potentially the presidency in 2028. Today I'm going to walk you through what the numbers actually show, what's driving this shift, and what it means for American politics going forward. This is going to be a comprehensive breakdown based solely on verified polling data, economic indicators, and on-the-ground reporting. Let's get into it. Let me start with the overall national picture, and then we'll zoom into the swing states specifically. A Civics poll tracking Trump's approval ratings across all 50 states shows that only about 40% of Americans approve of Trump's job performance, while roughly 56% disapprove. That's a net negative approval of minus 16 points. 4% neither approve nor disapprove. Newsweek, reporting on this December 2025 polling data, notes that Trump's approval rating is virtually unchanged from the previous month's polling, indicating that public opinion has stabilized at a level currently unfavorable to the president. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. Trump's approval is underwater, meaning more people disapprove than approve, in 12 states that he actually won in 2024. Let me repeat that. In 12 states Trump carried, his disapproval rating is higher than his approval rating. A Northeastern University analysis of the Civics data found that Trump's approval is negative in all 7 swing states: Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, North Carolina, Nevada, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. These are the states that were crucial to his victory. But the underwater approval extends beyond just the battlegrounds. It also includes Alaska, Florida, Iowa, Ohio, and Texas, states that Trump easily carried last year. The margins vary, but in the swing states, disapproval rates outpace approval by margins ranging from minus 11% to minus 15%. In practical terms, this means that in states like Pennsylvania or Michigan, for every 100 voters, roughly 45 disapprove of Trump's performance for every 40 who approve. Let me be clear about what this data shows and doesn't show. These are approval ratings, not vote choice. People can disapprove of a president's job performance but still vote for their party in elections. However, historical trends show that when a president's approval falls below 50%, the incumbent party typically suffers significant losses in midterm elections. The demographic breakdown of the polling reveals significant divides. Trump's approval is lowest among voters aged 18 to 34. With only 27% approving and 68% disapproving. Among those with postgraduate degrees, approval stands at 28% with 69% disapproving. On the other end, Trump polls highest among self-identified Republicans at 87% approval, and among voters without college degrees at 43% approval. Racially, the divides are stark. Among white voters, approval and disapproval are roughly split. Around 47% approve and 49% disapprove. But among black voters, only about 9% approve while nearly 88% disapprove. Hispanic and Latino voters lean strongly against Trump as well, with only about 1/3 approving and around 2/3 disapproving. Let's focus on that Hispanic voter number for a moment, because there's been a notable recent shift. An Economist and YouGov poll conducted from December 20th to December 22nd, 2025, shows Trump's approval rating among Hispanic voters at 28%. His overall approval in that poll was 39%, with 57% disapproving. Now here's what's significant. In the previous week's poll from this same series, Trump's approval among Hispanics was 38%. That's a 10-point drop in 1 week. The week before that, it was 39%. The last time Trump's approval dipped below 28% with Hispanic voters in this polling series was October 17th to 20, when he hit 25%. This matters because Hispanic voters played a pivotal role in Trump's 2024 re-election coalition. Trump made significant gains among Hispanic voters compared to 2020, particularly in states like Nevada, Arizona, and parts of Texas and Florida. Hispanic voters represent a growing share of the electorate, and they're concentrated in several key battleground states. Newsweek reported on this decline, noting that shifts in their support could pose major implications for future elections. Economic pressures and immigration enforcement could be driving a change, signaling possible challenges for the Republican Party's efforts to broaden its base and retain support in critical swing states ahead of next year's midterm elections. Fox News co-host Jessica Tarlov commented on this trend, stating on social media, "Donald Trump is sitting around 29% with Gen Z and 32% with Latino voters, basically back to 2020 levels. Those voters weren't locked in. Winning them back won't be automatic." Now let me take you to Capac, Michigan. It's a small town in St. Clair County, a predominantly white working-class area along Michigan's eastern edge on the Canadian border. Trump won this county with 66.5% of the vote in 2024. On December 9th, Reuters reporters visited this area and found something striking. Long lines at food pantries. Dozens of cars idling outside a firehouse that's been converted into a food distribution center. One of those in line was Taylor Ludwig, a 35-year-old mother of 3. She told Reuters she had arrived well before the pantry's 10 a.m. opening, seeking help she hoped wouldn't be necessary when she voted for Trump last year. Ludwig said, "It's definitely only a year into his term, so I'm going to kind of hold off a little bit before I really give my full judgment on things, but I expected a bit more. I was very, very hopeful that things were really going to just kind of go back to what they were before Biden." She added, "I'm not just going to follow along somebody like a sheep. I will follow you until I know it's not okay to." When asked about future elections, Ludwig made clear that Republicans could lose her vote in next November's midterm congressional elections if Trump doesn't move faster to fulfill his campaign promises on lowering costs. Reuters interviewed 19 Trump voters in Capac and other parts of St. Clair County. The results were telling. 4 told Reuters that if inflation and other economic conditions did not improve by next November, they could see themselves giving Democrats a serious look. A dozen said they would still vote Republican, and 3 said they were unsure or didn't share their voting plans. Bob Benjamin, a retired auto worker, said he came to the food pantry to pick up groceries for his adult grandchildren who were struggling to keep up with costs. While he voted for Trump in 2024, Benjamin said, "I would probably vote the way the conditions are going. If he's doing good, if you can see it coming out of a hole, then I give it 2 more years. But if it's starting to go back down again, well, maybe we need a little change." About half of those interviewed said they or their families were struggling to make ends meet. Most still blamed former President Biden for inflation, and all pointed to falling gas prices as a positive development under Trump. But the economic stress is real and visible. Volunteers at food pantries across the region described sustained increases in demand for emergency food programs, indicating that higher grocery bills have moved beyond a temporary squeeze for many families. Now let's look at the actual economic data for this region. In August, the most recent month with available Bureau of Labor Statistics data at the time of the Reuters report, the Detroit metropolitan area's all items price index rose just 0.7% annually. Gasoline prices had dropped 8.3%, but food tells a different story. Fruit and vegetable costs surged 9.4%. Nationwide, beef, coffee, and orange juice have climbed at double-digit rates this year. Electricity prices rose 6.9% in November, the largest year-on-year increase since April 2023. National inflation has cooled to 2.7% as of November, down from over 9% at its mid-2022 peak. But that headline figure masks sharp increases in everyday staples that hit household budgets hardest. So what does all this mean politically? Michigan is a crucial swing state that will help determine control of the Senate in 2026. Democrats are already making rising prices central to their campaign strategy. They're sensing vulnerability as Trump has downplayed what he calls the affordability issue, at one point calling it a Democratic hoax. White House spokesman Kush Desai responded to the Reuters reporting by saying the administration is working hard to address what he called a generational economic crisis caused by Biden. He stated, "The reality is that Democrats still have no actual solutions for everyday Americans. But Trump's statements about the economy being strong and inflation being under control worry Republican Party strategists." According to multiple reports, strategists say Trump's comments could make him appear out of touch and prompt some supporters to sit out elections. The Reuters interviews found that most of the 19 people they spoke with were unaware of Trump's comments dismissing affordability concerns, though only a few agreed with his assertion that the economy is booming and inflation is under control. Democrats are already crafting specific campaign strategies around this. In Michigan's Senate race, they've branded Republican candidate Mike Rogers as Price Hike Mike and tied him closely to Trump. Rogers has rejected the criticism, arguing his background helps him understand working-class concerns. Historically, midterm elections tend to favor the opposition party, especially when the sitting president's approval is underwater. The party holding the White House typically loses seats in Congress during midterms. With Trump's approval negative in key swing states, Republicans face an uphill battle to maintain their narrow majorities. Now, it's important to understand that Trump still maintains strong support among his base. The Civiqs data shows 87% approval among self-identified Republicans. A Marquette Law School poll from July 2025 found Trump's overall approval at 45%, with support among his base remaining strong even as independent voters trended more negative. This creates an interesting dynamic. Trump has a rock-solid core of support that approves of his presidency regardless of circumstances. But presidential elections and congressional control aren't decided by the base alone. They're decided by independents and swing voters in competitive states. The demographic data shows where Trump is losing ground. Young voters, college-educated voters, voters of color, and increasingly, Hispanic voters who had moved toward him in 2024 are now expressing disapproval at high rates. The question for 2026 and beyond is whether this is a temporary dip in approval that will rebound, or whether it represents a more fundamental shift in how swing state voters view the Trump presidency. Let me provide some historical context to understand what these approval numbers mean. Swing states have been crucial to presidential elections for decades, but their importance has grown as the country has become more polarized. Most states are now reliably red or blue. Elections are decided by a handful of competitive states where the margin of victory is often just thousands of votes. In 2024, Trump won Michigan by approximately 1.4 percentage points. He won Wisconsin by less than 1%. Pennsylvania was decided by under 2%. These are razor-thin margins. When a president's approval rating drops significantly in these states, it doesn't take much of a shift in voter behavior to flip control of congressional seats. A president with 55% disapproval in a swing state creates a very different electoral environment than one with 50% approval. The pattern we're seeing, underwater approval in states Trump won, has historically preceded significant midterm losses for the president's party. While midterm elections are still nearly a year away and political circumstances can change rapidly, the current polling presents serious challenges for Republicans defending seats in these states. So where does this go from here? The 2026 midterm elections will be the first major test of whether these approval numbers translate into actual vote switching. Congressional races are influenced by many factors beyond presidential approval, including candidate quality, local issues, campaign spending, and turnout operations. However, presidential approval remains one of the strongest predictors of midterm performance. If Trump's approval remains underwater in swing states through next November, history suggests Republicans will face significant headwinds. For Trump himself, these numbers have implications for 2028 as well. While that election is still years away, approval ratings in his second year could influence whether he faces a serious primary challenge or how Democrats approach their own nomination process. The economic factors driving dissatisfaction, particularly food prices and cost of living, are partially outside any president's direct control. Global supply chains, weather affecting crop yields, and Federal Reserve monetary policy all play roles. But voters tend to hold presidents accountable for economic conditions regardless of the underlying causes. The Hispanic voter trend deserves continued monitoring. If Trump continues to lose ground with Hispanic voters, it complicates Republican strategy in states like Arizona, Nevada, and parts of Texas and Florida, where Hispanic voters are a significant portion of the electorate. Let me summarize what we know based on verified data. Trump's approval rating is underwater nationally at around 40% approve, 56% disapprove. He's underwater in 12 states he won in 2024, including all 7 major swing states. His approval among Hispanic voters has dropped 10 points in recent weeks to 28%. On-the-ground reporting from Michigan shows Trump voters, including some who backed him in 2024, expressing frustration with persistent high prices and saying they're open to supporting Democrats if economic conditions don't improve. These trends are based on multiple independent polling sources and direct voter interviews. They represent real shifts in public opinion in the states that will determine control of Congress in 2026 and potentially the presidency in 2028. The White House disputes that there's a problem, pointing to falling gas prices and blaming Biden for ongoing inflation. Democrats are making affordability central to their midterm campaigns, and voters in places like Capac, Michigan, are standing in food pantry lines wondering when the economic relief they voted for will arrive. This is a developing story, and polling can shift. Economic conditions could improve. Political dynamics could change. But right now, today, the data shows that Trump is losing ground in the states that put him in office, and that has major implications for American politics. I'll continue following these trends as we move toward the 2026 midterms. If you want to stay informed with fact-based political analysis, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. This is Bill Harris. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.